to talk about today because I'm in a position currently where I am around, how can I put it? I am around more church-oriented people. I am, a lot of the work I do now on a day-to-day basis has to do with, dealing with people who feel the need to go to church, people who are Christians, who are devout Christians, so to speak, right? So on the topic for today, what I want to talk about is how important is it to bring our children to church? A better question, when looking at everything that I see in our churches today, why don't our children go to church? Why don't our families, why don't the parents of a lot of the kids in our community bring their children to church? Do we think church is necessary at this point in our progression, looking at everything we've been through in history? Should we go to church? Should we bring our children to church? Are we missing out by not bringing them into that building and allowing them to hear the word of God from a preacher, right? Is that something that we should be doing as parents, as black folks? Because like I said, I'm around a lot more Christian-based melanated people. So that's an interesting dynamic to me, because when we look at it, I would say if we're going to, because, I bring up this topic because young people aren't in church. When I go to churches, when I look at the main participants in the church communities, it don't be a lot of young people. And I think just looking at society today and looking at where we are as melanated people, I think young people have just disconnected from some of that rhetoric based on not feeling like it's a practical solution for some of the things that they're going through in their community, right? And I agree. And I'll speak about my opinion a little bit later, but let's do this. If you're a person who wants to be involved in religion, if you're black and you want to be involved in religion, I'm going to give you, in my opinion, how you should approach that topic. If you decide to bring your kids to church, if you decide to use one of the holy books to teach your children's lessons and things of this manner, I'm going to kind of tell you what I think or how I think this should be approached, right? Now, for one, if we're looking at melanated people in America, like I said, since we've been here, since slavery, all of the different facets of white supremacy and racism that we have to endure. One of the biggest things I would say, if you are going to enter into the religious realm, the first thing you would need to do is do the history on how Christianity has been used on our race of people in particular since we've come to this country. How with the use of missionaries and different factions of Christianity, different factions of religion, how they've been able to infiltrate our stability using religion as a weapon almost. You see what I'm saying? So I think learning the history of black people, of our history first. I think before someone becomes like a devout Christian or a devout Muslim or any of these things, even though some of these religions will kind of teach you something about black history a little bit, but I think ultimately it's your job as an individual to do your own due diligence to learn where you come from, to get a better perspective on why we're in the position that we're in today. So I think it's really important that the first thing you should do is do the history on our African spiritual systems, do the history on how we operated in Africa, how we connected with God in Africa. I think without doing that, you're kind of misleading yourself, or you're not using the correct context if you don't do the history. And I think that's on anything that we involve ourselves in, but especially on religion, because that's such a serious topic. It's such a such a mesmerizing force in our community, right? So the first thing you need to do, man, is do the history on your people. Do the history on where we come from. Do your own history if you can on where your people came from specifically. Learn the history on that before you get to learning about these figures in the Bible who we don't know if really really existed or not. We don't know if these people really existed on the planet Earth. We don't know that. You see what I'm saying? So before doing the history on figures that we hear in this book of parables, maybe the best thing to do first is do the history yourself, the real history of real figures through history who've made a difference, who've done different things that has changed the course of society, right? So do the history on religion, do the history on the religion that you actually choose, but also do the history on the figures in Black history that have been dominant, that have been effective, that have done things that have been necessary to get us to the next step. You feel me? Because I think sometimes we look to these mythological figures to empower us when there's actually people who've walked the earth that we can use to empower us as well. So doing the history is definitely the first thing you should do. And keep in mind, I haven't mentioned your child yet, because this is something you need to do yourself before you bring your kid into this realm of religion or spirituality or anything. You need to kind of figure out this shit on your own and get a contextual understanding of what you're looking at, right? So doing the history is the first thing you should do. Next, I would say taking time to research each of the religions that you're thinking about practicing. I think using tradition to pick your faith is a mistake. A lot of us are Christians and go to Christian churches, Baptist churches, Methodist church, whatever. We go to these churches simply based on our mom went there or our grandma went there. We're not doing our due diligence to say, you know what? Maybe I'm a Buddhist. Maybe I would be better suited to be a Muslim. Maybe I would practice Catholicism, or maybe I was better suited to practice something different. See, so before we just jump out there and say we Christians and start going to church, in my opinion, you're doing the research on history, then you're doing the research on the different religions.